WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR senior investigative reporter Patrick Madden. Welcome to The Common.
It's great to be here, Daryl.
It's your first time, right?
Yes, this is my inaugural voyage.
Wonderful, wonderful. So glad to have you, Patrick. So you're here because you recently finished an investigation about the fishing industry in the city of New Bedford, Massachusetts, and you looked into some risks in the area due to climate change. Now, what brought you to New Bedford to look into that?
So the big question, Daryl, is we have these stronger storms from climate change that are hitting coastal cities like New Bedford. And experts, they're getting increasingly worried about the risks to facilities that handle a lot of chemicals, dangerous chemicals. And New Bedford has this booming fishing industry. And because of that, it has a lot of seafood processing plants, ice plants, other facilities that handle a lot of dangerous chemicals. And so we went there to look at, how prepared are these places for the growing risks from climate change, but also looking at a big issue, which is backup power. Because experts say with more hurricanes, more storm surge, more power outages, that there's a threat to these chemical facilities if they're hit by a big storm, if they lose power, and that is the potential for a chemical spill. So, Daryl, we went to New Bedford to look into this, and what we found on the ground was actually a lot more than that. There's a neighborhood right near the fishing harbor. It's called Bedford Village, and generations of people from Cape Verde, the Azores, and other places have settled there and built a really vibrant community. And it's threatened because of its proximity to these big industrial facilities. So in July, I went there and met this great character, this community activist named Buddy.
My name is John G. Buddy Andrade. I am a 73-year-old Vietnam veteran, and I've been very active in civil rights issues around jobs, affirmative action, and environmental justice.
Buddy seems to know everyone here in Bedford Village.
Hey, Miss Khan. How are you? Hi.
Cars honk, people stop to wave, and he responds in Creole and Spanish and English and Portuguese. This is a place that has a lot of different cultures, and it's been like that for a long time, dating back to New Bedford's history as a whaling capital. We walk by historic sites like this jazz club that dates back to 1917, and on the side of it there's this brightly colored mural that details this neighborhood's rich maritime history and its ties to Cape Verdean culture.
The largest immigrant group here are the Portuguese and the Cape Verdeans, who have been here since time. This is also the home of Frederick Douglass. This is the home of Lewis Temple, who invented the toggle harpoon that revolutionized whaling. And New Bedford became historical and well-known because we were the city that lit the world through whale oil.
Like I said earlier, this place has history, and a lot of it's tied to the fishing industry, but the fishing port here also poses a lot of risks to the people that live, work, go to school here, because these industrial facilities handle a lot of dangerous chemicals, namely ammonia.
Ammonia? When I think of ammonia, I think of very hardcore cleaning. What are they using ammonia for?
So ammonia is used as a refrigerant in these big industrial facilities that process the fish or keep the fish cool or make ice. It's all tied to the fishing industry here. The problem is it's right on the water or near the water, and it's vulnerable to storm surge from a major hurricane. And one of the issues that we started looking at is, do these places have backup power? Because experts say if you lose power, if there's a big storm that damages the tanks, that is a key safety mechanism.
And you found that they have power backups, right?
We found that 2/3 of the facilities that have large amounts of dangerous chemicals don't have backup power, according to the EPA records. And none of the 3 facilities in New Bedford had backup power.
Why? Why don't they have backup power? Because that seems like a very important safeguard to have, a very basic one at that. So why don't they have this?
It's interesting you say basic because that's actually what Christine Todd Whitman, who is the former EPA head
and former New Jersey governor.
New Jersey governor, Republican governor.
As someone from New Jersey, I was like, oh, I know that name.
She told us it should be a basic thing, that these chemical facilities should have backup power. You know, hospitals, air traffic towers, the nuclear plants, they're all required to have backup power. These chemical facilities, however, are not required, although a lot of safety experts and environmental groups think that the EPA should require it, but right now it is not required. I reached out to the 3 plants in New Bedford for comments, and no one got back to me. And so back in New Bedford, I had a map actually showing this neighborhood, Bedford Village, and its proximity to these places. And I showed it to Buddy because it showed that Bedford Village is surrounded by more of these facilities than practically anywhere else in the country. But if there was a big storm surge, coastal flooding, God forbid a hurricane, I mean, what would happen here?
We're in trouble. There's the water right there. It's going to come up this way. It's going to come right in here. What would happen if all their chemicals got into the water, but more importantly, into people's homes?
Are there any other cities or towns, municipalities in the state that are vulnerable in the way that New Bedford is?
So we based some of our reporting off of a 2022 federal study looking at chemical facilities that are vulnerable to storm surge. And it wasn't just New Bedford. There was a facility in Fall River. There were facilities in Gloucester and several other places. So it really is, when you look at the map, which is also on our story, it's a coast issue.
Now, Patrick, you moved here from New Orleans not too long ago, and I understand you have some experience with hurricanes. And I wonder if you could talk to us about the impact that we could be looking at for the community in New Bedford.
Well, it's interesting, Daryl, because you're right. In New Orleans, I got to see this firsthand with different hurricanes hitting us directly at times, and also the damage to chemical facilities. I remember we were covering a chlorine plant that was hit by a hurricane, and there was a large plume of toxic gas that was, starting to surround a neighborhood, and everyone had to shelter in place. So there are incidents and accidents that have happened in the past because of big storms hitting these facilities. And so that was one of the reasons to look at how prepared is Massachusetts. And it turns out New Bedford has a history of hurricanes, and so that's one of the reasons why we looked at New Bedford.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here, but we'll be right back with more from Patrick Madden.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, host of On Point. At a time when the world is more complex than ever, On Point's daily deep dive conversation takes the time to make the world more intelligible. From the state of democracy to how artificial intelligence is transforming the way we live and work to the wonders of the natural world. One topic each day, one rich and nuanced exploration. That's On Point from WBUR. Be sure to follow us right here in your podcast feed.
And we're back with more from WBUR senior investigative reporter Patrick Madden. So you went to New Bedford a few times for this story. Did you talk to any residents to get a sense about what they think of all of this?
We did. And what we heard was that folks know about the fishing industry, but weren't aware about the chemical risks. And they also, told us just what a special place New Bedford is.
This is a massive melting pot, for lack of a better term.
That's Moses Galarza. He's lived in New Bedford for most of his life.
We always joke that, we have the best food, but we honestly do have the best food because it's kind of like it's authentic, it's real, it's right there.
He says what makes New Bedford special is in part its location by the water and its fishing industry. But there are drawbacks to having these industrial facilities right by the water and so close to neighborhoods. We told Moses about our story, looking at the growing risks to facilities with dangerous chemicals and the lack of backup power in a lot of them. Does that surprise you that some of these plants with a lot of chemicals don't have backup power?
That would definitely surprise me for sure. You would want them to be properly powered, in case things go down, you don't want those chemicals just sitting there, not being able to cycle through, making sure that they're staying where they're supposed to be staying and not seeping out. Sea-to-mouth seafood is obviously a huge thing for the community, but I definitely do understand that there could be some ways that we need to update and be wary of.
We spent the morning in Bedford Village talking to people in and around the neighborhood, and nearly everyone told us they didn't know about the risks of chemical accidents in these facilities. But that's not surprising. There's very little public information, in part by design. So it made sense when we were talking to people like Vivenda Gonzalez, and they felt like they were in the dark.
Put it out there so people understand it more, will understand what's going on in New Bedford,
Right. Do you think the city or officials can maybe do more of that kind of just?
Of course, because that's concern. I mean, of course, Anything's going to concern harm the neighborhood, anything you're going to want to know about it, of course.
So, Patrick, you say that there's very little public information by design. I want to zero in on that. Why?
So this was fascinating and frustrating, but it is very difficult to actually read these files for these plants. You have to drive to the EPA reading room in Boston, and you can look at the files, but you can only request 10 per month, and you can only take handwritten notes. So actually, to look at all these files for the state, I had to recruit my fellow reporters from the investigations team so that we could look at all these and make sure that we had all the information. But it is not easy, actually, to look at this. And so you can imagine if you're a member of the public, it would be hard to take a day off from work, go to the EPA room and make sense of this.
When was the last time there was a hurricane in New Bedford?
So Hurricane Bob in 1991 was the last hurricane to hit southeastern Massachusetts. Bigger ones like the Great New England Hurricane of 1938, Hurricane Carol in 1954 had bigger, more devastating impacts on New Bedford.
So those are fairly recent, historically speaking, right? Did you talk to anybody who remembered any of those storms?
We spoke with one woman who has lived in New Bedford for almost half a century, Victoria Madera, and she does remember the hurricanes.
Yes, I'm worried. I'm afraid of hurricanes, I'm afraid of earthquake, everything. It's bad.
Do you ever worry about all the industry here and the chemicals and what would happen if a storm hit those plants?
It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. Yes.
They call me Money Mike.
We met Money Mike on a bike outside of Dunkin' Donuts.
I'm a commercial fisherman, and this is the best fishing industry in the world right here, is in New Bedford, and I know that. And safety comes first.
Mike says he isn't too worried about your typical New England storm hitting New Bedford. The city has a levee, and it comes with the territory. But a big, powerful hurricane, Category 4 or 5, he says that would be different.
It's going to wipe everything out and tear the buildings apart, regardless if that's what happens. So.
And, when it comes to these big seafood plants, because they have a lot of ammonia in them, right, that's what keeps everything cool.
Well, when you get a disaster like that, it really doesn't matter where you put them. We just do the best we can. Pray for the best.
Money Mike.
So Money Mike, I think he illustrates one of the conflicts here, which is that the fishing industry is a big source of jobs for people. It's also just a huge industry for New Bedford. So it's, on one hand, there are a lot of these environmental risks, but it also is kind of what is driving the economy there.
Yeah. So I want to know if residents don't know or did not know until you got there, I guess, right? If they don't know and are able to do anything about it, who does know about this situation and who can do something about it there?
Well, first and foremost, this is a federal issue. So the EPA regulates these facilities when they handle large enough amounts of dangerous chemicals like ammonia. So ultimately, this is a federal regulation issue. But locally, we did speak to the mayor of New Bedford, John Mitchell, and he definitely told us he's concerned about this issue. He's done some training exercises with the fire department to deal with chemical spills, to look at what would happen if a major hurricane hit and there was storm surge hitting all of these different places. And he told us, while major hurricanes don't hit New Bedford as often or as frequently as some other places. I mean, this is something that he's looking at and is concerned about.
We could have a scenario where there's flooding of multiple plants, and there would be multiple events to respond to. So what we're trying to do is just ensure that that we understand those risks that were in these plants.
So, Patrick, before we wrap up, where can people read your investigation?
You can go to WBUR.org, you can read the story, and you can also go to the EPA and learn more about these issues, because I think one of the things that needs to happen here is just more public awareness about this issue.
That was WBUR investigative reporter Patrick Madden. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you like what you're hearing, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple or Spotify. Rate and review us. Let us know how you're liking the show. We would love to hear from you. And if you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common. You can also send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. And now it is that time for me to let you know that The Common is produced by Franny Monahan. It's mixed by Emily Jankowski and Paul Vaitkus, and it's edited by Samantha Joshi and Ben Brock Johnson. And our theme music is Me, from Hisu. And from the newsroom of WBUR, I'm your host, Daryl C. Murphy. I'll talk to you next week.